My name is Kambi-Shamba. I'm a licensed acupuncturist. Also, I'm a Chinese certified herbalist. I've studied homeopathy and clinical nutrition. I've been involved in medicine for over 45 years. This has been my life, and I want this to continue as long as possible because this is such a great life to have. Today's presentation is, I'm giving out some of the pearls of wisdoms that I have picked up over the years. Well, you know, anti-aging has been co-opted into this whole idea about, how you look, as opposed to really about your health. So there's a whole movement of anti-aging where people are talking about, like, this is an anti-aging cream, this is an anti-aging, vitamin, and so forth and so on. People are talking about, plastic surgery. They're talking about all kinds of ways to extend their life through medicine and, through things like that, right? To look good. Most of the idea of anti-aging today is to look good. So that's something that's completely different than when we talk about longevity. Longevity is like, how you live your life, the expand of your life, right? So we try to get as many positive, helpful years out of your life, as opposed to, looking good. So if you look good, but your body feels bad, what's the point, right? So longevity is a concept. They don't call it a concept like in Asia that I do, in Chinese medicine, we talk about, things like the aging process in Chinese medicine is like your jing, which is the substance that's given to you at birth. And that jing, when it starts to be reduced, then your aging accelerates. So it can happen at any age. You can deplete your jing at any age. So you could be in your 20s and deplete your jing through the use of excess sex, drugs, overnight parties, no sleep, all those kind of things. Your jing you could die or be an old person in your 20s, basically. So this concept of jing is given to you from your parents when you're born, and it carries on in your life. You can improve jing. If your parents have poor jing, you can improve your jing by doing things like meditation, qigong, good foods, acupuncture, herbs, supplements. All those things could extend and enhance your jing. So in the Western idea, they're thinking more anti-aging, trying to prevent different kind of diseases. And, in the West, especially like in a place like the United States, it's considered to be normal that when you get to a certain age, say in your 50s or late 40s, you might start experiencing things like, diabetes, hypertension, those kind of things are just considered to be normal, or heart disease. So in terms of aging, in the Asian systems, they talk about aging not in trying to retain this youthfulness, but trying to age in such a way where there's an expansion of your capabilities, not just physical, but emotionally and spiritual. So the idea of aging and longevity is a very different concept than we have in the West. So I'm really a big proponent of that, of longevity, and the work that I do is really focus on getting people to age long but healthy. And so it's not, because aging is not considered to be a disease. Like in the West, that's the way it's looked at many times. We got to stop that thing from coming. It's coming, so we got to stop it. So we got to look good. That's a whole different, another ball game. Practices that we use and that I focus on in my practice is to work with three basic ideas. One is your spirit. Chinese medicine's spirit is called the mind. It's very different from in Western idea. The Western idea of mind is like more related to like mental health, as we call it, and things like that. But in the Chinese system, mind means spirit. And then we talk about, basically, practices like qigong, breathing practices, and also herbs and acupuncture, along with having serenity in the mind, right? That's very important. So much of disease in Chinese medicine is based on, this is what Accelerate Aging does, is based on the idea that your mind, your spirit impacts on your body. So 85% of the diagnoses that I do in Chinese medicine, the cause is based on some spirit essence disease. And so my practice is to help people recognize things that they're doing, in their spirit that is causing this manifestation in the body. So they're saying, I have headaches, or I have back pain, or I have, these named disease, diabetes, hypertension, Alzheimer's disease, all these diseases, there's a basis for them in Chinese medicine that is not based on physicality. Chinese medicine works on energy, so it's qi. And qi is yang. It makes movement. It's dynamic. The symbol of the yin yang. So this whole idea in Chinese medicine is that you are a dynamic individual, and there are a lot of different things that can help keep that dynamism going. So the practices that we do is, like, for example, if you do breathing exercise, right? Breathing exercise now works on many different areas of your body, not just in your lungs, but it works on your lymphatic system. It's your cardiovascular system. It also sends, blood to the brain, right? So it helps your brain become, clearer in your thinking, because you're getting more blood and more energy into your brain, right? So I recommend a lot of times to people who feel sluggish mentally and fuzzy, hey, go do some cardiovascular. And come back, wow, I feel different, right? They feel more focused, and they're getting more energy into their brain, right? So that's a way of doing it. The breathing exercises also get energy into the brain. And in addition to that, the herbs in Chinese medicine also work to increase the flow of the qi in the body. So I recommend herbs for longevity. Mainly the herbs for longevity would be things like herbs that will tonify the blood, and tonify the qi, and tonify the yin and yang of the kidney. So that would be more related to what I would be recommending to people who come to me who want to use herbs to, work, to give them, to extend their life, and to have more energy and more vitality and feel better, all right? And the other things is that foods in Chinese medicine, each food has a category. Certain foods have effect on different types of organs in the body, and certain foods depress the energy, like foods that cause what they call like phlegm. Phlegm is not like phlegm, like we know phlegm in the West, mucus. Phlegm is a disease in Chinese medicine that is an accumulation of dampness, which turns to phlegm. Dampness in Chinese medicine is considered to be, obesity, or excess weight. That's what we call dampness in Chinese medicine. That turns to phlegm. And that can have all kind of harmful effects. It could, from the physical all the way to, psycho-emotional problems. We have people who have too much issues with phlegm, and, we could say, diagnosed in Chinese medicine, this person has bipolar or schizophrenia, because there's phlegm involved there. But so in the culture that we live in, there's a lot of phlegm foods that we eat. Phlegm foods would be, like a lot of foods that cause dampness. So those foods would be like a lot of rice, a lot of carbs, the things that pastas, things like milk, cheese, all of those foods cause a lot of dampness in the body. And consuming those foods over a long period of time turns into phlegm, and that becomes a real problem. And once it becomes phlegm, then we can start talking about in Chinese medicine, hypertension, strokes, heart disease, all kinds of things is going on. So the idea is that when we talk about things we can do for longevity, we go back and look at, some very basic things, the diet, the exercise, which, include qigong, cardio, stuff like that. Also, we talk about, deep breathing practices, things that would, you would use in meditation. So we promote meditation, but, part of that meditation is we work you through a series of breathing exercises to help slow your brain down. Slow those hurts in your brain, right? So slow it down, slow those brain waves down. And the other thing is, once we get there, we help you focus on how you can do release some of those emotions, those long-held emotions that's causing these problems to appear in the first place. And so that's how we do it. It's very practical, very straightforward, and is based on experience. So this is not something where, we're making things up. This is based on, thousands of years of experience. In Chinese medicine, the cycles of life regulate how you live. And it's very gender specific. Women have a 7-year cycle that they go through. And every 7 years there's a change, a big qualitative and change in their life. Okay, men is every 8-year change, and so we can see that. And these are ancient systems based on how people lived in those environments. Of course, today those cycles really don't play as well, because what has happened is that the world has kind of changed in terms of the pristine nature of the world, where there's no impacts of chemicals on the environment and so forth. Today, young girls are having a cycle at 8, 9 years old, or even younger, where according to the ancient cycles, the time for the cycle would be like 13, 14 years old. So that'd be like the second, part of the 7-year cycle for women. So that it's kind of hard to put that into perspective, but there's this idea that there is cycles that regulate our life. And this is what is important in Chinese medicine. We have taken that idea that there's certain periods in your life when there's certain demands on your body that you need to pay attention to. And those demands are very important. Like, for example, once a woman reaches into her childbearing age, her nutritional status is completely different. Men, when they reach a certain age, their nutritional status is different as well. So you have to eat according to, your situation, your age, and your, people, their jobs require certain kinds of nutrition. And one of the things I get into people a lot about cycles, understanding cycles on what they call a circadian cycle. That's a daily cycle. And these cycles are very important. So there's a time in Chinese medicine, every 2 hours, there's a change of energy according to the organs in these cycles. Now that's very different than in the Western idea of the circadian rhythm. They talk about, the hormonal ups and downs and things like that on the circadian cycle, and then, women on their monthly cycle. But in Chinese medicine, we have these different organs that have an impact and are open during various different cycles. And we can all pretty much dictate or diagnose based on the time that person is having issues. We can relate that to a very specific organ. Now, going back to these larger cycles that we were talking about, life cycles, the thing about these life cycles, what they do is they play into certain types of, different lifestyles that you have to engage in at different times of life. So, for example, the way many people approach life is that they work this hard job or this mind-numbing job or whatever kind of job they have that they really don't like, but they have to put food on the table. And at the end of that, 65, 68, they retire, and then just nothing, right? And there's a shell of a person. So this is not a great model at all. So I would recommend people really start to cultivate the inner nature, the inner life, right? So that inner life is very important. And that inner life has to do with like the part of you that exists, regardless of how you feel. You may feel happy, you may feel sad, but there's a part of you that stays the same. And that's what the whole, focus of being centered is about. In Chinese medicine, we always talk about being balanced and being centered. Well, there's a part of you that is always centered. Regardless of what's going on in your life, that part stays centered. It doesn't, it's just there watching. It's always there. And this thing is there because you feel the same way you did when you were 7 years old, even though you might be 40 years old or 50 years old or 20 years old. Inside is this part of you that stays the same, and it doesn't change. And it looks out into the world, right? And you're going through all these different various situations. So what that inner part of you is what the Chinese talk about really when they start talking about balance. Now, of course, today a lot of people talking about balance, they're talking more like, well, you balance the organs, and so the organ balance is important. But beyond the organ balance, like I explained it before, there's the spiritual part of you is the most important aspect of your health. And so Chinese medicine digs deep into that. Of course, we get a lot of discussion about, well, what does that mean when we talk about spirit? And in Chinese medicine, they have quantified these, what they call 5 different types of spirits that deal with the 5 different organs. And it's not some kind of mystical something, it's very real. And we can relate it to your emotions, to thoughts, and other things. But cycles, and to know what cycle you're in each one of the phases of your life is regulated by a cycle. And if you know that cycle, then you know how to harmonize and extend, your time being healthy. You don't know when you will leave. You don't know when you will, that date, you don't know. But within a certain perspective, you do know how you feel, and you can keep that feeling of, that healthy feeling, you can keep that as long as you, engage in certain practices. Okay, how the Chinese medicine use the mind and the spirit. They're very specific. Like, for example, I'm going to talk about the organs. So now the organ system, they have a couple different ways of looking at the body, but we're going to just talk about the organ system. And the organ system, this is how we get to what we call diagnostic patterns. So, and each organ has a function. So, for example, the spleen has a function of extracting the qi out of the food and then distributing it to the body. It gives you, most people say, oh yeah, that's energy. So we say energy. But in another way of understanding is that there is a elemental spiritual energy of the spleen. So the spleen has a very sober kind of outlook on life. It's very structured. It's very clear in the way it makes you when your brain is functioning. So in Chinese medicine, clarity of thought is the spirit of the spleen. So if you know someone who has muddled thinking, it's too much dampness, and I spoke to you before about the dampness in your body. Well, when your spleen is healthy, the dampness is eliminated, and your focus in your mind is clear. So they look at the spirit of the spleen, more or less your ability to be focused, to have a clear vision and clear thoughts. Right? So that's what they would call the spirit of the spleen. Now, on the other hand, the spirit of the liver, because each one of the organs have, and so these paired organs, and I'm not going to talk about the paired, I'm just going to talk about the one aspect of there's like the spleen, stomach, now liver, gallbladder, I'm just going to talk about the liver. Now the liver, in a way, it's the most, what we call the most ethereal, meaning the energy is very light. The qi is very light. And so it's very easy to set that energy off. So one of the things you see with liver issues is people are easy to anger, like that, right? That quick coming and going of energy and emotions is seen through the lens of a liver, right? The other thing about the liver, since it's very ethereal and it's very expansive, it's one of those spirit in terms of the body of, what is my life purpose? What am I here for? What is my vision? Can I see? These kind of things, the idea of seeing, right? Visual, right? Vision, right? So that's all of the spleen, the liver. And if that liver energy is jacked up and imbalanced, then the person will tend to have no vision, won't be able to have, an ability to express that in their life, aimless, those kind of people, right? And you could see them in your practice when I see a person come in my practice and I see what kind of life they're living. They don't have any, aims in life. They don't know what they want to do. Right away, I know, hey, let's work on the liver. And and after a few treatments, the person now starts to reassess. Okay, what am I here to do? What is my purpose here? So all these questions now come up, and we sit down, we talk about them, and I treat more if there's some other stuff involved. But you know, this is how Chinese medicine look at spirits. And the heart is the organ that deals with the spirit of joy. Now, it's not just simply joy, like, okay, I'm joyful. It could mean excessive joy. So today we see a lot of problems with children who, you know, play these video games, right? It's like this excessive joy that they get out of it, right? And so in Western medicine, we talk about these dopamine hits, where the kids that get these dopamine hits and they can't get off these things. You go to your child and say, okay, put your device down. They start screaming, they start fighting, they're going through all these tantrums, and you're like, well, whoa, what's going on? It's not anything that it's a very real physical dopamine hit that the kids are getting every time they play these devices, and they get addicted to it. And it becomes very difficult to get them away from these devices, right? So that would be an excess joy, right? Excess joy would be someone who's addicted to, you know, drugs and, you know, any behavior, excess sex, or, you know, I want to be the best, you know, and I'm going to do everything to be that's all that's, you know, the heart. When I say joy, they really talk about serenity. And the other thing about the heart, because the spirit of the heart, right? The fire, it's the fire element, right? The heart is if you have problems with sleeping, that's an indication of some heart issues, right? In Chinese medicine, anxiety, shyness, those kind of issues. So those are spiritual aspects of the heart, and those are represented like disease. So there's lots of other examples I could talk about, but you know, just to get you in quickly into an idea of how Chinese are looking at this. The idea of the spirit is very different than what we call spirit in the West. The idea in Chinese medicine is that there's four seasons, and each season has a different effect on a different organ system. So, for example, in the summer, the heart, you know, organ is impacted by the summer. The fall is, now that's the lung, and in the winter is the kidneys, and the spring is the liver. So we're in the spring right now. So I want to talk a little bit about the liver and talk about how that impacts. The liver is, in Western concept, the liver is the organ of detoxification. So in the spring, the body's now trying to release all the toxins that it accumulated over the fall and the winter. So there's this big push for the body to get it out, all the toxins out. And so, as you notice outside, in the beginning of spring, like you'll see in February and late February, early March, there may be snow on the ground. The ground may be frozen, but you'll see these little green shoots that will come out through this hard earth, right? And it's like, wow, that's some powerful energy coming through that earth to get through that ice and frozen dirt, right? How does it get through that, right? So that's the energy of the spring. It's very fierce. It's very strong, right? And so your body's going through the same processes that are happening outside in nature is happening inside your body. So what we do is we align ourselves with this energy, and we now do a detox of the liver, which is what's happening in your body. So in terms of Chinese medicine, each organ has a season, so we pay attention to that, and we take advantage of that, and that's how we work that. I specifically set a protocol out for all of my people that I see over the years, over the tens of thousands of people over my career, and they're calling me all the time. When are we going to do the liver detox? It's springtime, and I'm like, okay, we're going to do the liver detox. So here's what we're going to do. I give herbs, Chinese herbs, that's going to detox the heat and the toxins out of the body. Some of these herbs may be a little bitter and a little strong. They detox. I give them different supplements like glutathione, which is probably it's an amino acid. It's probably one of the most, it's becoming a prominence now, but over the years, I've been using it for at least 20 years. It detoxes any known chemical bacteria that's known to man. It detoxes out of the body. So it's a very powerful system. The liver has this, in the Western chemistry, it has a phase 1, phase 2 detox. And the phase 2 detox is when the glutathione kicks in, and it changes the chemistry of the toxin from something pernicious to something that's not dangerous at all. And the body just passes passes out. So that's why we use that. Also, we use a lot of antioxidants, help to, the body to, heighten the immune system, right? So when you're kicking the heavy toxins and things out, even heavy metals, you want to kick in your immune system. So we give you lots of antioxidants, S to C and things like that. And also, we make sure that vitamin C is always there. It's one of the best vitamins that you could ever invest in, vitamin D3. Of course, vitamin D3 is something that is free. You can get it from the sun, especially if you live in a place where it's warm, like we evolved as people of color. We evolved in places where it was always free and we were always in the sun, so we never had problems. Just a little note that the difference between, there's some studies some years ago where they talked about the population of African people in the Americas and then African people on the continent, and they were looking at the types of diseases. So in the American context, all these people from African descent, they had prostate cancer and breast cancer at a high level, and they went and looked at the control group in Africa, and they didn't have the same type of the high levels of prostate cancer or breast cancer. And the one thing that you can note that the vitamin D3 levels is very high in Africa. So I would suggest that if you have any melanin in your body, I would suggest you take some vitamin D3. There was a study in England when the South Asians showed up with all these diseases. In England, England is very cloudy. And this study was back in the 80s. And they found that's when it started to become big, that people realized that vitamin D3 was deficient in people's body and was causing all of these diseases. Over the years, there have been different discussions about vitamin D3. Some people call it, instead of a vitamin, they call it a hormone. And some studies over the years have talked about how vitamin D3, the effects on, the immune system. So during COVID, there was a big push amongst some of the practitioners across the world using vitamin D3 in the therapy to help prevent the ravages of COVID. So your severity would be much less when you took vitamin D3. Anyway, I don't want to get too deep in that, but the idea is that taking these different supplements and things like that will help.